And joining us now, really a great pleasure to welcome a woman you all know her from her work on television, movies, Broadway, and her autobiography, which was very successful, came out last fall. I Said Yes to Everything, a memoir, is now out in paperback. We're going to talk now to the great Lee Grant on the telephone today. And Lee, real pleasure to talk to you. How are you?
It's a pleasure to talk to you. I'm fine. I'm sitting at my window talking to you on the phone and thinking, ain't science great?
It really is.
I don't have to wear makeup. I'm looking across the street at the wonderful window, and there you are in Tampa.
I grew up in New York. I believe you live in New York City, right? I grew up in that area, so you're in a good part of the country.
Which part?
I grew up just outside the city on Long Island. But you're based in the city. So
you're a Long Island kid.
Yep, but as most of us do, we come down to Florida.
Yes, that's true.
Well, first of all, congratulations on the success of the book. I know it came out last fall, and you got a lot of great reviews on it, and now out in paperback. When you sat down to write it, I know it's difficult. I've talked to other authors that have written autobiographies. You really have to delve into your life. Was it a process you enjoyed, or how did you feel about it?
Oh, Doug, it was like kind of letting a dam open. It was... I just sat down at the desk I'm talking to you at and just started let things were coming out. I wrote it longhand.
Right.
On those children's books that you had at your school desks, and it was like reaching into myself, and suddenly all of the stuff that was inside me just needed to be explored and come out, and it was a very, very healthy exercise for me. I was forgetting names and forgetting lines, and so there was a kind of fear that I was forgetting, and so it was all there: the smells, the touch, childhood. It was a very reassuring experience for me.
You grew up in New York City and did a lot of work in theater there, and then you went out to Hollywood and did actually television first, then Hollywood. But you've had quite a life, Lee.
Yeah. I really did, for a little girl from 148th Street, Riverside Drive. Yeah, I did.
Let's talk a little bit about it. Your start, like you said, growing up in New York. Were you one of those children that kind of enjoyed getting up in front of people, or was that something that you always had that in you?
No, I was really kind of. I was not one of the dance moms girls at all. Although I started in dance, my mother, who was a Russian emigre, had those dreams from going to the movies, those black and white movies of richness and glory, and of course she had it for me, and so she had me dancing at the Metropolitan when I was 4 years old, and I was on stage at the Metropolitan when I was 4. So it kind of went on from that kind of not mean stage mother, but kind of glorified stage mother, of wanting me to fulfill her dreams of romance and glory, kind of.
Yeah, you tell some great stories.
Started it.
You tell some great stories in the book about those times as a child in New York. And a lot of people around the country don't really realize that. If you grow up in New York, you're really exposed to a lot of those kind of things that other people don't have that opportunity. Like the Met and the dance.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And I went to music and art. I was thrown out of music and art after a year, but I went there, and I don't know. My grandkids are here today. One's 10, one's 13, and they come to New York, and it's like they live in Jersey, so it's like, wow, this is the big city. And they go down to Barnes and Noble and buy books, and it's a very cool place to grow up in. And also, when I was a kid, there was nothing to worry about. You went out on the street and played,
right,
and came back when it was supper time. The streets were so, fun and safe, and I lived across from Riverside Drive, so the Hudson was there, and it was a great place to grow up.
You also went, and I've always found this fascinating, just hearing interviews with other people that have done it, the famous Actors Studio. It seems like that was quite a wild place.
It was a wild place with wildly imaginative talent. Marlon Brando was there, and Maureen Stapleton, and the cream of the crop, the kind of Hemingway crowd, only in New York and only actors. And we were all, together and friends and rising, and it was a terribly exciting time.
It seems like just the concentration, like you said, of talented people, unusual people, all in one place together, working together on scenes,
right.
And that really kind of revolutionized, I guess, the Broadway theater, didn't it, for about 20 or 30 years? The whole thing.
It did. It did revolutionize it, and the writing that came from the theater at that time, and the actors that came up, Marlon and all of those people. You went to the theater and your jaw dropped. It was like, the theater was shaking. It was so wonderful. Every once in a while that happens again, but that's every once in a while,
yeah. Not the same now. I mean, nothing wrong with the theater now necessarily, but it's not that same type of atmosphere, I guess, particularly with plays. Right?
It's not. You go in, and there'd be like something shaking in you, when Arthur Miller's play, Death of a Salesman. I mean, it was like, what's happening?
Yeah.
This is a new door,
Of course, that led you to Beyond Broadway. You were quite young. Did you enjoy that whole process? I know you talk in the book about sometimes, it wasn't easy to get on stage, but did you enjoy that?
Well, I loved it, and it was my world. It was, I'm an uptown New York girl, and the theater downtown was the scope of what my world was. There was nothing else. There was no United States of America. There was no Ohio. There was nothing. That from 48th to 148th Street was, pretty much it for me, and it was a thrilling world. And I was like an alley cat. I just loved it, and I was in Detective Story when I was in my early 20s,
right.
And it was a huge hit, and all of a sudden, I was from drama school, from the neighborhood playhouse to Broadway, and being the new discovery of the year. What more can a 20-year-old kid ask for?
Yeah, great to have that at such a young age, and we won't go into it unless you want to touch on it briefly, Lee. But I mean, you talk so much in the book about what happened in the '50s, the whole blacklist thing, and it really is
Right.
It's a fascinating story for people that don't know what went on. I wasn't around then, but just kind of reading about it. Terrible times for many people, but you're really honest about that. Was that difficult to kind of recap in the book?
It was a relief, Doug, actually.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know you can imagine. A lot of it was a mystery to me, because when I read what I wrote in the book, it's funny. These men on the House Un-American Activities Committee were they seemed like old guys to me, and they were ranting and raving, and I was sitting there, protected by my lawyer, and they just seemed like an odd comedy on Broadway, and I was told by him, in order to protect the people who were, either I was married to or knew as friends, to take the Fifth Amendment. So I didn't feel threatened, but I felt I was in Alice in Wonderland. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
I'm being yelled at and pointed at, and just being told to be careful not to say anybody's name, because they could lose their livelihood. They could, never work again in films and television. And I thought that it was like a comedy, but throughout my life, there's been a lot of reverberations from it. I went home and I couldn't introduce one friend to the other. Their names just went out of my head, and that exists to this day. There's a fear of saying someone's name. And it kind of seared itself into my brain in front of the committee, and I can't introduce one person to another. It's a kind of trauma.
Yeah.
And so you never know it at the time, and certainly there's always somebody else who can introduce them, but it became a block. A name block. I'm afraid of saying someone's name.
It's hard to believe now, and I think people that watch TV and movies, it's hard to even fathom how that could even happen back then. You mention a name or whatever political beliefs are would cause you to not work for so long, and it seems impossible that happened.
12 years.
Yeah.
What?
It seems impossible that could have happened. Yeah.
Yes, but then, so many things today seem impossible, too.
That's true.
I look back and I think, gee, those were the good old-fashioned times. At least I was alive, But I think when I said yes to everything, like kids, you land in a Broadway play and you're a star. You land in front of the committee and you're out. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
Life has got this funny way of leaving you absolutely unprepared for the great things or the terrible things.
Right.
And you get through them. That's the whole business.
Okay, you came back, and I guess television. I actually happened to see one of your episodes when you first came back after you were out of work for a while. I didn't know it until I read the book, but you were in a Mission Impossible episode I saw recently on Netflix. So that was one of the early shows. You came back and to do episodic television, right?
Oh yes, yeah. As soon as they said I was okay again, well, that went into the hippie period. You went from the cold, dark 50s. And suddenly this door opens and hippies are there and love is there and people are naked on stage. It's like, what? What is this other door now that I'm stepping into? This is freedom like they never had certainly in the tight ass 40s and the crazy 50s. So you started another life. And I was in Malibu and I brought my daughter Dinah, who was 8 at the time, and my boyfriend Joey, who is my husband now, and it was like all of a sudden you were in a rainbow place. You were free. You were on the beach, and everybody wanted to work with me. Everybody. I couldn't, work with me. Yes, work with me. Yes. So it was yesing to everybody who wanted to work with me, and it was like, where am I, heaven?
Yeah, we'll let the folks, read the stories in the book, but, you went on to do some, great film work in the 60s and 70s. Of course, Shampoo was the one you won the Oscar for. Some stories about that backstage are quite interestingly. We don't have to tell them now, but I know the people reading the book are going to enjoy those.
Yeah, there was a lot of smoke and drink and never thinking of tomorrow going on, and it was a good time was had by all.
I think that period of movies, and I happened to see some of them, as a kid at that time, and then looking back on it, it was quite a period of filmmaking. I guess late '60s into about the mid to late '70s. That's not there now. That type of movie isn't being made.
Oh, Doug, I agree with you. I agree with you so much. The '70s, Hal Ashby, Warren Beatty, Coppola, all those, Norman Jewison,
yep.
They were making movies like nobody had made before, and they were, not dark movies. They were vibrating with life, and coming to an audience in an entirely different way. You laughed, you cried, and it was all new. And I had no idea that this was my new yes, But The Heat of the Night, that was the first movie I made.
Right.
Coming back into Hollywood, and it just broke open everything. Broke open the color bar. Sidney Poitier, for God's sake. So as bad as the 50s had been, the 70s were like, God, heaven.
Yeah. There's so many hits, one right after another, and then that led you, of course, later on into becoming a director, which you continue to do today. Some great work there, and you tell some stories in the book about that. But we'll let the folks out there read it. But just kind of looking back on it, Lee, when you write, like you said, it was kind of cathartic for you to write the book. So I guess you've gotten a lot of great response to it, and now out in paperback. So congratulations on that.
Thank you so much, Doug. Yeah, if you have any ideas of what else I can write now, once you write your life, you say, okay, now it's Tuesday. What thrilling thing is going to happen when I walk down to Zabar's? So it leaves me wanting more.
Yeah. So you still have the passion. I can hear it.
Yep. Yeah.
That's great.
But there are some interesting things coming out. This Caitlin Jennings.
Oh, sure.
Transformation. Well, 30 years ago, I did a documentary called "What Sex Am I?" And it was a brilliant, if I say so myself, documentary on people who are having sex change and transgenders, and now it's going to be coming out again on Netflix or on other places, and it was a really, really important documentary. And these people, I don't know what happened to them 30 years later, but that's something I do want to find out.
Well, that'd be fascinating. Yeah,
all of those documentaries, are have to be followed up.
Lee, I'm sorry we kept you long. You're just fascinating to talk to, but thanks for joining us. I said yes to everything that's the name of the book.
Thanks, Doug. Have a good day.
If you'd like to order the book we're talking about, please go to DougMilesMedia.com and enter the author's name in the Amazon search box. Thank you for listening. Please come back soon for more conversations here at DougMilesMedia.com. This has been a presentation of Doug Miles Media, all rights reserved. You can listen to or download previous programs at iTunes, Stitcher.com, or